Swifter, it's video 3 of 3, and we're going to cover page JSON. We want to make sure that your Swift skills are worthy of the Iron Throne, and not the kind of skills that would get you sent to the wall. Let's code. Now I'll scroll through the next questions on the exam, and you can pause if you want to read them, but I'll also describe what we're going to do next. So our app loads a page of 50 Game of Thrones houses, but there are 444 houses. So in order to get information on more houses with this API, we need to work with what's referred to as page JSON. Now, many APIs use page JSON, and they don't deliver all of their data at once. Users might not need that, and delivering all the data at once would lead to excessive server use, larger networking loads, perhaps even delays in what the users see on their device if they don't need to see all of that data at once. So what should happen in this app is that when you scroll to the bottom of the currently loaded data, the app should then load the next page of data, and should continue to do this until there is no more data available. Now, we've already worked with the Pokemon API, and that API specifically has a next and previous key, where those key values held the URL for the next and previous pages of Pokemon data. The Game of Thrones data does not have that. But the way that we can get more data is we alter the URL. You can see there is a page number as well as a page size parameter in the URL. We're not going to change the page size, but we will increment the page number. Now, there's already a page number parameter in our houses class. So what we'll do is we'll incorporate page number into our URL string so that we use this in getData. And then each time we get data, we're going to increment the page number by 1 so that the next time we get data, we'll have that URL that's changed, incremented by 1, so we'll get the next page of data. Now, how do we know when to make a call? Well, in our table view self for rowat, we can take a look at the indexPath.row. And if this is the same as the count of house array, our number of houses minus 1, then we're showing the last record in our data. So if that happens, we should call getData. And if we've incremented the page properly, we should get the next page of data. Now, how do we know when to stop? Well, if we make a call to get data, we get data. But when we look inside of the count of data, and if we see that no records were returned, then we know that we're done. So we won't increment the page number any further. Now, we'll make one additional modification to this code at the end to make things a little bit more efficient, but let's start with what we've just described. First, let's fix the URL string so that we can get a paginated URL where the page number will change. So I'm going to highlight my string that follows this URL property, copy it, and then paste it over so this is what's assigned to the URL string. Then we'll find where it says page equals 1, and I'm going to remove the 1, and I'm going to replace it with string interp page number, referring to the page number property of the class. Then we'll head down to our do catch loop inside of our getData function. And just below where we decode the JSON, I'll put in a comment that says, if there is data in the array, increment page number by 1 and update the house array to equal house array plus our new array. So what we want to do is we want to keep what's in the house array, but add these new elements that we've downloaded from JSON. Now, if we just go ahead and keep it the way that it is right now, where we're assigning the decoded JSON to house array, even if we get a new page of data, then we'll stamp over the old data. That's not what we want to do. We want to get our results, and then we want to add those results to any existing house array. So what we'll do here is I'm going to highlight and cut out self.houseArray. I'm going to replace that with letResults. So now we've got a new constant that's got the data that we just downloaded. And if you option click on results, you can see it is indeed an array of house info. Now down below, we're going to first check to see if we got anything back. So if results.count is greater than 0, open and close curlies. Now if we got nothing back, then we want to skip this. But if we did decode our data into results and there's something in there, then that means there's something on this page. There could be something on the next page too. So we're going to increment page number. So we'll be set up for the next time we call getData. So we'll say self.pageNumber equals self.pageNumber plus 1. And then below this is where we add our results to our existing house array. We'll say self.houseArray equals self.houseArray plus results. Now let's head over to viewcontroller.swift, and this is where we'll code the logic to get more pages of house data. We'll do that in self for rowat, and we'll say if indexPath.row equals houses.houseArray.count minus 1, open and close curlies, and in the comment up here I'll say if you're displaying the very last element in houses.houseArray, then load more. Then if this is the case, that means we're displaying data for the very last element in the data that we've retrieved. So let's go ahead and retrieve more data. So we'll just call houses.getData in here, and inside the curlies, then we'll say self.tableview.reloadData. Remember, we've got to put this inside of a dispatchqueue.main.async, open and close curlies. Just put self.tableview.reloadData inside of those curlies. And we're good. Now, just to reinforce what's happening, and so we can see this when things are executing, I'm going to put a print statement up top. We can consider this to be a learning print statement that lets us know how many elements are in house array, meaning how much data have we read in so far. Also, what's our current index path.row that we are dequeuing the cell for, or setting up the cell so that it can display in our table view. So I'm going to say print string interp, and I'm going to use indexPath.row. So I'll copy this from below and then type into my print statement, loading row, paste in indexPath.row, colon, and then inside of the string interp, indexPath.row. Then out of string interp total houses, and then inside that string interp, I'll put in houses.houseArray.count. So this will let us know as we scroll down, hey, how close are we getting to the very last element of our array? And since these table view cells are numbered, I'm going to say indexPath.row plus 1. So now let's build and run just to make sure that we know what's going on here. So we see our theme play. And now we've got our first 50 houses loaded. How do we know that we've got 50 houses loaded? Well, we see it says 50 total houses here in our print statement. That number 50 is houses.houseArray.count. Now the indexPath.row goes all the way down to 16. We're seeing 13 rows here, so it's loaded 3 that we're not seeing on screen, but you get the sense. We've already set up this first 16 cells in our table view cells, but we've got 50 more houses of data that we've downloaded. Now let's scroll. See, as we scroll up, the indexPath.row is increasing. Let's scroll up more, and let's scroll up all the way to the end. Watch what happens. Our indexPath.row is increasing 49 out of 50, and then once when we hit 50 out of 50, we load the next 50 houses. So now we're saying out of 100 total houses. Now we can actually scroll back up and take a look at these print statements to the console, and we can see right here where we hit 50 out of 50, that's when we make the next call to the new URL. Everything after that shows out of 100 total houses. Our if statement checked to see if the indexPath.row equals houses.houseArray.count. Once it was equal, we did another call to houses.loadData, and it got the next page of data because we incremented the page number by 1. Now, as I scroll through my table view and I start to approach 100 out of 100, once I hit that, now all of a sudden I've got 150 total houses. How come? When I was 100 out of 100, the indexPath.row was 100, houses.houseArray.count was also 100, so I made another call, and because I incremented page number by 1, I got the next page of house data. Now I'm going to keep scrolling down until we get to the end. Ooh, quick detour. House Stark. How about that? Winter is coming. Swift is coming. And we'll scroll down. And now watch what happens when we hit that 444th house. Now this works. It loads them all. No crashes. Mission accomplished. But there's one more thing that we should correct. Every time the user tries to scroll and hits the last cell in the table view, indexPath.row equals houses.houseArray.count. So we end up calling getData. Now, if we've already shown the last available house in all of our data, we end up getting data on the last page each time this happens. Now, our code in getData doesn't increment page number by 1, and it doesn't add to the data that's already in house array, but we do call tableview.reloadData, which is why if you scroll up, you'll see after the call in our last page, which is page 10, a page with 0 houses in it, we reload table view cells from about 431 to 444. Those are the cells that are visible on a device of the size that I've got in my simulator. If you have a different size device in your simulator, your numbers might be a little bit different, but it's behaving otherwise the same way. But we should probably change this so that we don't make any additional calls to get data once we've gotten a page that returns an array of elements 0. So let's quickly do that, because that'll give us even better code. And while we're not charged for this API, it wouldn't be good if we were using an API that charged us per access. Plus, we don't want to be sending data to the user's device that they're not going to use. So let's head back into our code, we'll hide the debug area and stop execution in the simulator and head into houses.swift. Now let's just add a new property up top that checks to see if we should continue loading. So we'll call this var continue loading, we'll say equals true, so the initial condition is we should go ahead and keep loading. Then we can scroll down into our do catch clause, and after we say if results.count is greater than 0, well, if it's not greater than 0, meaning we equal 0, meaning we just loaded a page that contains no additional records, then what we want to do is else, open and close curlies, self.continueLoading equals false. So now that we've got a flag that says, hey, we shouldn't continue loading, we can go over to viewController.swift. In self-for-row, if we get down here and we check the condition, hey, should we be reloading data? Previously, we just took a look to see if indexPath.row equals the last element in houses array. But now we're going to say, hey, if this is true and houses.continueLoading is true, then we want to go ahead and make our call to houses.getData. But if we've loaded a page that has no additional records in it, then we've set houses.continueLoading to false, and we shouldn't have any additional calls to houses.getData. Now, just to make sure that we've done this, why don't we go ahead and delete this print statement up here, because that's just going to clutter up our console. But we'll count up the number of times that we've called getData, and we'll print that out as well. So up top, I'll add a new property to this class. We'll say var number of times called, and we'll start that equal to 1. Then we'll scroll back down to cell for row at. Inside of our call to houses.getData, we'll print out number of times called equals string interp number of times called, and we'll have to add a self in front of number of times called. And on the next line, we'll increment that. So we'll say self.number of times called plus equals 1. Now we'll build and run. This is actually going to give us 1 less than the number of calls, because the first time we make the call, it's not here, it's in view.did.load. We see our code runs, we get our theme song, we're scrolling. Look what's happening over here in the console. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 calls, 6 calls, 7 calls, 8 calls, 9 calls, and then when we hit this 9th call, well, we're at loading 444, but we're not making any of those extra calls. Mission accomplished. Hopefully you feel good about what you've learned in this. Lots of concepts covered. We work with table views, passing data, making an API call, and page JSON. Keep at it, Swifter. Your coding skills are worthy of the Iron Throne.